Chapter 1131. Spread the word. Over the next few minutes, dozens of messages were sent back to Bara, describing the situation at the Darklight Host Guildhouse. But it was the message about the man who was willing to teach Master Smiths how to use the lost art of the Dwarven Runeforge that garnered the most attention. They had seen a few runic items in the city already, either purchased from Drod, or shipped by merchants and brought by travelers. But the weapons that were going around were mostly commander rank ones. The common items that the guild house kept in stock, not the sort of masterpiece that they were looking for. However, having seen them was enough to let everyone know that there was a chance that this was a real offer. The question was, who is willing to relocate to learn it? Dwarven mastersmiths were usually over 100 years old, and had long-lasting ties to their home forge, which had usually been in their family for many generations. The only ones who would be willing to go would be a disgraced master, who wouldn't qualify for the task of certifying journeymen, or someone from a family with more than one recognized master. There were some of those in Bara, but few enough that the Sculptors Guild leader wasn't sure that they would get a volunteer without spreading the message all over the Dragon Isles. There were plenty of other dwarven nations with master smiths, but favors were best done close to home. The staff that Opal had created for the workshop village continually refilled the drinks and food as the sculptor argued animatedly with his system interface, looking for someone to do the job and weeding out members of his guild who he didn't trust unsupervised. I have a team of sculptors coming, and the master is an earth mage, so he can help with your guild's material shortages. The cost won't be low, but I am sure that we can work that into the contract. He finally announced.
Karl smilet.
That will work wonderfully. The standard contract has profit sharing in it, and clauses for additional work, including raw material creation. If it needs to be amended, just let me know. A copy was sent through the system interface, and Karl waited for everyone to read it and decide if they would sign. The whole process was highly entertaining to Slate, as he had never seen a workers' guild simply accept a contract before. He hadn't read Karl's offer, but it was clearly more generous than the counteroffer that the guild leader had prepared, as he hadn't even brought it out. Ashbringer's voice was followed by the sound of many stomping feet, and then the demonic Grandmaster Smith led a large group of dwarves into the tavern. Ooh, isn't this place swanky? And fox-kin barmaids? How do ye expect any of the apprentices to get to work on time? An old dwarf with a bald head and thinning beard demanded. That's not really our concern, is it? Keeping apprentices in line is the job of the masters. If they can't handle their ale or a pretty lady, you can just keep them in the forge. There are cots. Ashbringer explained. Petros and the Sculptors Guild leader both looked confused when they saw this group. They weren't the sculptors that he had called for. Karl, these fine gentlemen are from the Blacksmiths Association in Zindab. Someone informed them that there was a chance to obtain dwarven runecrafting here, and they came right over to negotiate. Ashbringer explained. Slate Petros gave the smug group of aging dwarves a confused look. How did you learn about the opening so quickly? I wasn't going to put it up on the open board until tomorrow. The totem-ranked dwarf standing beside Ashbringer smirked. I have my connections. The two dwarves glared at each other, and then Sapphire walked in with Bobby and Joe behind her. The Drod City leaders were definitely doing some day drinking today with all these ranking visitors just showing up in the city unannounced. Or they might have just decided to ignore whatever went on at the Darklight Host Guildhouse. Oh, everyone is here. Guildmaster, we had some questions about an item that I wanted to make, but it looks like everyone is here already. The Blue Dragon announced. Oh, you know these fine gentlemen? Karl asked. That might be an overly generous description. But yes, I know them. I taught both of the young masters Petros primary school. She gestured to the old man beside Ashbringer and to Slate, who smiled gently at her. Teacher Sapphire, I see that you have found a new target for your curiosity. Did the Darklight host promise you a new skill to get you out of the library? Petros asked. Didn't just offer. He already taught it to me. I'm closer to recovering a lost art of the dwarves than either of you, and I can't even use it when I do. She gloated. The balding old man snorted in amusement, then shook his head. Hassan Petros, Master Dwarven Smith from Zindab. formerly of Bara. It's a pleasure to meet you, guild leader Carl. Is that ale that I smell? Carl gestured to the table. Come and eat. There is plenty of food ready. We have sculptors from the guild coming, but it seems we might not need to wait for smiths. Slate raised his hand to stop them. Before we get started, when did you move to Drod? Teacher? I could have sworn that you were in Xylaz, looking for knowledge with the mythic dungeon teams. Sapphire nodded. I still live there, but the Darklight host has locations in both cities and a portal between them, so I came here with my questions. It's not a big thing, shaman. I will be back home in an hour or two, perhaps closer to 2. The young apprentices here are most interesting. Carl smiled back at the dragon. At least the chaos of the guild house didn't put you off your desire to work with us. They really are a great bunch, and we've got a whole new workshop made here. If you want to relocate the workers from the Alliance Manor, there is much more room here. It's loud, though, so it might be wise to have the runecrafters stay there, while the sculptors work here. Sapphire waved her hand dismissively. We will work it all out. I memorized all 296,000 possible compound runes last night, and I've got a fairly good grasp on them, but I came across an item that you made, and the outcome had no bearing on the actual instructions in the runes. She held up her handwritten copy of the runes, and Carl laughed. Read it in Dwarven, not Runic. It's a poem, of sorts. Chapter 1132. Choose a Forge. Sapphire gave a very undignified giggle as she read the short poem about handsomeness and virility that someone, most likely Loros, had written on the commander rank charm bracelet that she had seen. The primary function was personal grooming and cleaning clothes, but the little poem gave a small bonus to the wearer's attractiveness and strength. Read in Dwarven, it said only the most rugged and manly know the value of cleanliness, but in Runic it was basically gibberish about strong arms and beards. It had started as a joke by Carl, doublespeak that had a meaning in both Runic for function and ancient Dwarven for poetry, but the dragon hadn't realized that other than herself, Carl was the only one present who spoke the language fluently. Ah, I get it now. I wonder if it works in Draconic. Sapphire pondered, then walked off to sit at another table and work on a bracelet. The dwarves chuckled, and Carl shrugged. Blue dragons get like that with new knowledge. Give her a chance to test her theory and she will come finish her conversation with you. But on to important topics. I see that we have a totem and a lot of overlords. Are you all part of the same guild or group? I don't see a system tag for an organization. Hassan shook his head. No, we all research together, but we're not part of any sort of formal organization. That's a good thing, I think. If you're part of another group, it's a separation level between the crafters and the sales of the products. If you were going to be learning here and working here to make products, but there was someone in the middle looking for a cut of your income, we would have to adjust the deal so that you wouldn't end up broke.
Carl explain it.
The blacksmiths nodded in understanding. Oh yes, that would be an issue. I know that the sculptors pay an annual fee to their association. The blacksmiths do too. But it's not a large one. It's just enough for them to keep track of everyone and send out the certificates. The Sculptors Guild leader finished his ale and rose to his feet. You've got new members to settle. I will go get the sculptors ready. They should be here in a day or two. Carl shook the dwarf's hand. I look forward to meeting your recommendations. The Darklight host has plenty of work for those with the skills. Once the sculptor was gone, Hassan looked over the dwarves from Drod, who were all gathered in the tavern now, preparing for the hardest part of the transition, the bargaining for the best forge spots. Ashbringer raised his hand to get everyone's attention. As the lone guild member among the smiths, I will be the arbiter for the forge choices. The third-level forge by the entrance is already taken, but you may choose any other. He ordered. What if we were guild members? Hassan asked. Then you would have gotten to choose first as the totem-ranked smith. Then me, as the longest-serving overlord. Ashbringer joked. Hassan smiled. Well, I wanted the one at the back of the room anyhow. I don't like apprentices walking back and forth in front of my door all day. So that works out perfectly. Now, should we do this by lottery? Ashbringer shrugged, and Sapphire looked up from her work. I have an idea. We used it to pick chairs when I was teaching school. Everyone, write your name on a piece of paper and put it in the cup for the forge spot you want. Then, I will pick one name for each spot, and any spots that weren't chosen will be available for the names that weren't picked. So, it's up to luck whether you get your first choice or not. The blue dragon suggested. The dwarves considered that, and then reluctantly nodded. Sapphire smiled, and took out a cloth with holes cut in it, and a collection of cups. You can go in any order you like. I will be using magic to pick the slips, so it doesn't matter who goes first. She instructed, using her well-trained schoolteacher's tone. Carl laughed as the dwarves had a silent slap fight over who would get to drop their names first, which ended when Sapphire gave them an unamused look. Form a single file line. One at a time, drop your name in the chosen cup. She ordered, and the dwarves all fell in line, well-trained by a childhood of blue dragon clerics teaching basic school. They did fight over the spots, but they followed her orders, taking their positions by internal hierarchy that Carl didn't understand. While they were all overlords, they were from 2 different cities and at least 4 different forges. So he hadn't expected it to go so smoothly. Such was the power of the blue dragons. The line went through once, and then Sapphire lifted the curtain and removed 6 cups. There will be a second round, she declared, then cast a spell that caused names to lift, and then fly to the various forges. Carl smiled. Once everyone has chosen forges, I will upgrade them with runes. Each forge can be slightly different if you have preferences for your forge fire. The victorious dwarves cheered, and Ashbringer patted Hassan on the back. You should have him do yours first. If you've got a favorite form of forge fire, or other conditions that work well with your skills, his runes can do a wonderful job of recreating them. I have gotten quite proficient at using ghost fire in my forging process, and it adds an excellent chance at soul-based attack and defense bonuses to my items, even without targeting them. The elderly smith nodded. That's not a bad idea. Soul defense is even more rare than soul attacks. But it's not my style. Rune Master, might I ask you to accompany me to the forge? I know just what would be perfect for my next masterpiece. Carl followed him to the forge at the back of the new crafting area. Not only would he upgrade the forge, but Carl believed that he had just the right combination of skills to give the old dwarf a proper upgrade. If he mixed the language proficiency for Ancient Dwarven, which wasn't a skill, but was listed by the system, with runecrafting it gave him the option to make a new type of skill book. Book of Dwarven Runeforging requires master level or higher blacksmithing or runecrafting. Requires Bloodline Dwarf. Chapter 1133. Master Hassan. The forges weren't actually different. They were all the same except for their position within the workspace. At least for now. Before we start with the forge upgrade, I have a question for you. How would you like to join the Darklight host? Carl asked. Hassan frowned and took out a carved stone pipe to take a long drag. Becoming a proper guild member at my age? I suppose there might be advantages. Being in the guild will also let me access the guild storage, and I'm too old to be lugging raw materials across the forge, even if there is a conveyor from the storage room. All right, I will accept your offer. Guild leader Carl of the Darklight host. Guild member added Hassan Petros. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, dwarven runeforging. Will be transferred to the prematurely balding Hassan. The dwarf glared at his notifications. Why the hell did you have to bring that up? I'm older than Slate is by 10 whole years. He grumbled. The messages are actually set by the system. I don't get any input into them. But now that you're in the guild, you can just grab a jar of hair growth cream and work on your hairline. Carl suggested. Hassan chuckled. It's all because of my slow childhood growth. I thought that I could do things better my own way, and I didn't make it to royal rank before I was getting old. Then I gave in and made it to overlord and finally totem, but my youth was long gone, even with the extended lifespan. Well, now you don't need to look like the old man anymore. At least not in the beard. But before you go off on a fashion journey, what do you want me to do with your forge? Carl asked. I specialize in earth magic, so if you can add some deep earth element to the runes on the forge fire, I think that might be best for my work. Hassan offered. Carl thought about it. What about a lava forge? I've seen the demons using them, made of superheated stone. With runes, there is no reason that I can't make a totem-ranked lava forge, which can be hot enough to melt anything you want to work with. Oh, now that sounds interesting. Alright, let's go with that. Carl began writing the runes, including the spell inscriptions for ghost fire and earth manipulation, onto the forge. It wasn't a quick process, but when he was finished, the space was a masterpiece, completely covered in black runes. It seemed to ooze darkness until the forge was activated. Then the deep red glow of the forge, flickering with blue ghost fire flames, lit up the room. Hassan didn't say anything. He simply took a block of mithril from his storage and tossed it into the totem-ranked crucible. He worked the bellows, forcing air through the works, and nodded as the crucible began to glow and the metal softened. That was perfect for what he needed. But he didn't need liquid mithril, so he pulled it with the tongs and began working on an axe head. I will let you work. Don't forget your new runic skills. Once the weapon is nearly finished, you're in for a real treat. Carl announced, then stepped back from the forge. Yes, see you soon. The dwarf was already lost in his work, so Carl began to work his way down the line, stopping at each occupied forge to give them the runes they needed. Unlike Master Hassan, the others simply wanted what they called a proper dwarven forge fire. Just totem-ranked forge fire. They would add all the bonuses to the items themselves, while keeping the forge itself as a neutral factor that didn't add or remove from any other effects they wanted. That was the great downfall of a specialty forge. You could only make certain types of items with a heavily elemental forge. Like Ashbringer and his demonic limitations, Master Hassan would only be able to make a few types of armor and weapons at that particular forge. But that was enough for him. It took until late evening to get everything sorted and all the forges operational, including the unused ones that they didn't currently have a blacksmith assigned to. But it revealed a small oversight on his part. They had forgotten to get the dwarves to pick an actual home before they got too deep into their work to care about anything else. That was easy enough to fix, though. He just put up a map of the work area in the tavern with a sign-up sheet for housing. It was included in their work contract or, in the case of Master Hassan, his guild bonuses. Later, Carl would ask the others if they also wanted to join, but he also hadn't offered them the bonus skill yet. They could learn of its value from Master Hassan. He had enough excitement for the day, and just wanted to find his Dana to cuddle up with and have a nap. Carl found her in their room in the Xylas house, eating snacks while helping Ray decorate the bunnies. The crafters had a day off coming up, and they wanted new fashion to go out into the city that marked them as Darklight Host Guild members, but which looked good enough for a day out on the town. The issue was that Ray wanted to dress the bunnies like princesses, and the bunnies wanted to wear something sexy. Carl was inclined to side with Ray. The bunnies' personalities were far too innocent for the sorts of outfits that they wanted. But he did recall something about the bunnies worshipping the goddess of fertility. What about a compromise? Ray, can you make what I'm thinking of? Carl suggested. He focused on the image and Ray gave him a concerned look. But she made the dress, which was not only shorter in the hem than what Ray had wanted, but also had transparent silk panels up the sides. Dana gave Carl the same look that Ray had. However, the other three were all gushing about how amazing their friend looked. The bunny god is a fertility god. As I understand it, they don't like wearing too much clothing unless it's a work uniform. This is a good compromise. They're still adorable, but not all covered up. Carl explained. Ray looked over the effect, then added stockings with little red bows that matched the color of Lala's eyes, and tied a silk bow in her hair. That was better. But Dana just thought that it looked like Ray had gift-wrapped the bunny for someone. Lala loved it. Chapter 1134. Carl's Dana. The other three were given dresses in the same style but different colors so that you could tell that they were together but not identical. All four dresses had the Darklight Host's black and white emblem on the left sleeve, in case anyone could miss that they were spoken for. But Carl suspected that the 8 Dragonkin would not be willing to let them wander unattended. They were extremely protective of their little sisters. Ray, I have a big plan for today. Do you think that you can help me make it work out? Carl asked. There wasn't any better moment, and he had been putting this off for far too long. It would probably come as a huge shock to Dana, but Carl was confident that Ray would help, and that Dana would say yes. Once the bunnies were finished with their outfits, Ray motioned for Dana to get up. "We're throwing a party, you need a new dress as well," Ray announced. "We're having a party?" Carl asked, feigning ignorance as they silently plotted their next moves. "Yes, my chronologically impaired friend. We have a major milestone to celebrate. We have skipped far too many birthdays, but now both you and the Dana Mage are over 18, while both me and Thor have our hatching day coming up. 4 is a big age for Sero. Well, Thor might not be a Sero anymore, but it's still a big age. If he were a Sero, this would be the year that he hit his full adult growth." Ray explained. "Oh, that is a big one. You're right. I shouldn't have forgotten that." Carl agreed. Ray winked at Dana, who realized that the spider had made the event up on the spot, so that she had an excuse to continue her work. Then Ray got a flash of inspiration. "We need to have a mating ceremony." "Yes, that is perfect. I will talk to the Lala Bunnies about the details. Now, get naked and raise your arms to the side so I can work." Dana stared at her, not moving, but Carl moved to stand behind her. "What do you think? Would you like to mate, my lovely Dana Mage?" He whispered in her ear, then smirked as Dana's face flushed bright red. While she was distracted, Carl took a platinum ring from his pocket and used earth manipulation to quickly add runes to it. It wasn't easy to get all the runes for life link onto the band of the ring, but she was so shocked by the sudden tag team of distractions that Carl was already sliding the ring on her finger by the time that her brain recovered. Carl turned her to face him, and Dana's eyes filled with happy tears as she saw him on one knee, then noticed the ring on her finger. "Dana, will you marry me?" Carl asked as she stood frozen. Kara laughed from her pile of loot as she ate popcorn. "Ooh, this is good. You broke the Dana. You totally screwed up the order of operations." Thor noted. "It's going to work." Remy insisted. "Maybe if we add more sparkles?" Opal offered. Dana mages only get excited about Carl and new magic. This should work. Hawk disagreed. 1,000 possibilities flashed through Dana's mind. The difference in their growth rates, the centuries of life ahead of them, all the new places to see when they were still on very different levels. The fact that Ray was impatiently waiting for her to undress so that she could start on what was totally not a wedding dress. Dana was sure that she could feel Kara watching them from somewhere, but she tuned that all out. She loved this crazy little family, and she couldn't see herself giving up on Carl to go another route. Yes, I will," she agreed, and flung herself in Carl's arms. "I'm going to have to wait to make the dress, aren't I?" Ray mentally complained. Then silently Shadow stepped out of the room to leave Carl and Dana alone. Even Kara left her space to go play with the gargoyles. They could use a bit of privacy for this part, and a reinforcement of the soundproofing spells in the bedroom. Tessa and Thor were relaxing on the sofa, reading the same novel, when Kara appeared with a tray of snacks, which brought Lotus and the bunnies right behind her. They were eating those before the badger stole them. "What's got Kara all worked up today? I haven't seen her this smug in a while," Tessa asked. "The Carl is mating Dana," Thor replied proudly. "They do that fairly often," Tessa reminded him. Ray flicked Thor on the head. "He means that Carl asked Dana to marry him. We set up the perfect ambush when I was dressing the Lala Bunnies." Lotus squealed in joy and turned to run up the stairs before Ray caught her. "You can congratulate them later. They are busy now." Lotus grabbed Ray by the hands and spun her in circles. "Good work, excellent work. I didn't think that they would ever get around to it. But an ambush proposal? That had to be your idea." Ray frowned. "He sprung the trap too early. I had an outfit in mind." "Don't you think that would have given it away?" Lotus asked as she stopped spinning around Ray. Ray shrugged. "I will just ask Opal to edit it when she makes the replay." "Opal isn't watching everything that happens in the house, is she?" Tessa asked, suddenly concerned. Ray smirked. "Opal sees everything. I always liked this part of the romance books. Steamy, spicy, all the good stuff." Opal agreed. Tessa gave Ray a suspicious look, not sure if she was liking the implications of that. But the Lala Bunnies were all laughing and poking each other, while making quiet jokes about all the silly things they had done since they settled into their new rooms. Ray's suspicions were confirmed. Bunnies really were too pure for this world. Chapter 1135. Spread the Joy. Standing at the top of the stairs after a brief affectionate moment with Carl, Dana did her best not to laugh. She had changed into a different dress, and Carl had on a new shirt, as she may have mistakenly torn his with her beast form's claws when she got excited. But they were intending to go down and give everyone the good news. Carl wrapped his arms around her shoulders and waited as they listened to the group. "Are you ready to go face them?" he asked softly. "I think so. I just need to mentally brace myself." Dana agreed. Carl took her hand and escorted her down the stairs, waiting for the moment that Lotus saw that they were out of their room. "Ah, there she is. I have to see it. You got a ring, right? A pretty one." Dana held out her hand, showing the platinum ring with its runes and the diamonds set in it. "Ooh, and it's a Carl special." Lotus held up Dana's hand so that everyone could see. For 2 seconds before the pair were swarmed with bunnies. "Congratulations, Miss Dana. Yay wedding." Dana stroked their ears as the girls celebrated, then noticed the look Tessa and Naksha were sharing. "Would you like to see?" she asked. "Of course. We're just wondering where we're going to do the wedding. There could be some very important guests there," Naksha replied. Dana hadn't even thought of that. The guest list for the wedding should have their friends from the raiding team, probably the other Alliance Guildmasters, their friends from Druid, whoever Carl intended to invite, then Supreme Lady Matilda and their parents. She would be happy not to see her useless father again. But her mother would be heartbroken if she knew that she had missed her daughter's wedding. Then there were Carl's parents. His mom was a sweetheart. It was all overwhelming, but she had good friends, and they could certainly help with some of the details. Maybe they even had a specialist here who could do some of the details for her. Wedding organizers were a thing in the Golden Dragon Nation. Carl noticed when Dana began to hyperventilate and picked her up to set her on one of his hips. The distraction when he bounced her broke Dana from her thoughts, and she swatted at his shoulder. "Put me down. I'm wearing a skirt." Carl relented, then kissed her forehead. "Welcome back. I thought we'd lost you for a moment. Don't worry too much, we have a bunch of clerics, including one who is centuries old. I am sure that at least one of them has trained for this moment." The air shimmered around them, and an old woman in black robes walked through with a familiar totem-ranked vampire, who was being led by a leash on a collar around her neck. Dana had to work to hide her surprise at the situation, while Tiffany was pretending that none of them existed. "Oh right, I will end your punishment early, but no trying to run off on me again," Matilda insisted, then ended the spell that was linking Tiffany to her. The collar and leash vanished, and the vampire was magically changed into a white and red dress that matched what Ray had just dressed the Lala Bunnies in. Tiffany sighed and rolled her eyes. She really was only leaving for coffee. She had no idea what sequence of events would have led to her not returning, as the Chaos Dragon had seen in her vision. "I heard my name and wedding planning, so I came as soon as I could," Supreme Lady Matilda declared. Then Azaf, immortal regent of Sholaha, stepped out of a portal beside her. "Matilda, we have talked about this," he began, then saw how excited everyone was. "Wait, I missed something." Carl smiled at the confused immortal. "I would like to invite you to my wedding. We haven't set the date yet, but Miss Dana said yes to my proposal." The immortal sighed, then smiled. "I would be honored. And now I understand why Lady Matilda felt the need to suddenly show up here." Matilda looked around the room. "Will we even have enough room here? We might need to rent a venue. Azaf, do you have a good spot in the city? I'm sure that we can touch up the right venue to be suitable for a wedding." Then the dragon plucked Dana from Carl's hands. "We are going to have so much fun. Come along, ladies, we have much to do." Then, everyone was gone, leaving Thor and Carl standing alone in the living room. "We will be back later. I will take care of the Dana," Kara assured Carl from wherever they went. "Try not to let her get too overwhelmed, and don't let them talk over her ideas. Carl agreed. Matilda knows. Well, she knows many things, but she also knows how to do this. The badger had a good point. A dragon that could see the future was probably a wonderful wedding planner.
Carl winked at Thor.
Well, what should we do today? They've stolen our women for the wedding planning. Thor shrugged. I was thinking of transforming to go have a nice nap in the tiny world. The pond in his space had been made for when he was still Sero-sized, and Thor couldn't bring himself to alter it. So, he either needed to reduce his size or he wouldn't totally fit in the pond. But there was a full lake for him to lounge in inside the tiny world.
Carl laughed.
In that case, I should probably get some work done. We've got enough requests already, and we've got sculptors coming soon. Thor laughed. Yes, make all the warriors extra stabby. It will make Ray happy, even if you're using dwarf armor and not her clothes. Good point. Enjoy your nap, and I will start working on the last of the armor sets that are in the guild storage. Let me know if you get any fun ideas for later. Chapter 1136. Sculptors. Carl was nearly out of armor sets when he got the message from Sapphire that the sculptors had arrived. The dwarves were still in the yard when Carl walked out of the library. The workmanship of the aging stone building had pulled them into intense discussion on what could be done to the old barracks building without completely tearing it down. But Carl could tell that they were also enjoying the stress relief of the healing totem in the yard. All of them had luggage with them, on top of what was surely in their inventory. Good afternoon, gentlemen. I am Carl, the Druid branch leader of the Darklight host. It's a pleasure to meet you all. The dwarves nodded politely, and one middle-aged man stepped forward. I am Master Geralt. I am looking forward to working with you. From what we have seen, Druid is quite different from Burra, but in a good way. Quite friendly. The other dwarves laughed, and the master shrugged. I thought that the best way to get here would be a straight line down the side streets. But apparently demons don't build their cities that way. We may have ended up in the more interesting parts of town. Carl laughed and shook his head. If you came here from the portal platform, you didn't. There are some interesting sorts on the west side, but the east side is where all the questionable activities happen. I recommend that you not go before you're familiar with the city, at the very least. The demons are quite friendly, though, at least most of the time. The other sculptors were openly laughing now. He got beat up by an old woman for cutting through her yard, and punched in the face by some massive feathered guy for talking to his wife. One of the others explained. Carl gave the master sculptor a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. I will find you a primer to demon culture. But fear not, we've got a whole workspace filled primarily with dwarves, and at least one of them can surely help you acclimatize. There are a few others working here, primarily demons, but some orcs, dragonkin, and others, plus the dragon and the beastkin who usually work at the Xylaz Alliance house. Geralt smiled. Yes, I see that you managed to recruit Teacher Sapphire. Her niece was my teacher, and she used to come bring her lunch. Everyone knows the dragon, it seems. She was the teacher for our master blacksmith as well. Geralt looked around, then spotted Hassan, who was leaning against the entry of the workshop and smoking his stone pipe. Master Hassan, it's good to see you. Hassan harumphed and rolled his eyes. Good to see that you survived the divorce. It was a close thing there for a while. Well, welcome to Druid. Come take a look at your new workspace. It's across from the forges. The sculptors all looked confused at the comment. The building was only a little over 10 meters wide. There wasn't room for them all to stand in there, much less work next to a forge. They might not be engineers, but their spatial awareness was impeccable. Hassan stepped back inside, and the sculptors immediately recognized something was off when he simply vanished. It was a side effect of the spatial distortion and the dim light inside, but it was interesting enough to get them all moving. The 10 sculptors pulled their luggage inside and paused by the entrance. Carl raised his voice to be sure everyone heard him. Everyone, welcome to your new home. This is the crafting space of the Darklight host, Druid branch. Hassan, have the smiths chosen rooms yet? The master smith nodded. We did it after we ate. It's not like the place is crowded. There are hundreds of rooms.
Carl nodded.
Well, there is workspace for that many, if you're working 3 shifts at the forge, or working in pairs. Master Geralt looked around the cavern, which reminded him so much of Bara that it was almost uncanny. This is wonderful. Spatial magic, he asked. Technically, an illusionary domain that we filled with earth magic. It's a form of space magic, but not a fully spatial spell. Carl explained. All right, we can put our gear away and get to work. The guild appointment said that we would be expected to create a demonstration piece to prove that we were qualified. Geralt explained. Certainly. Pick a room and come back in 10 minutes. I will have a collection of items available for you to work with. Technically, Tion would. But it was the same thing for the sculptors. Like the smiths, they had gotten 1 totem and 9 overlords. Carl hadn't specified a power level for them, only a skill level. But they should be skilled if they were using their crafting skills to increase their power level. Carl had never actually seen a purely crafting class before, or seen what they could do with only magic. It was going to be an interesting experience, and he was certain that Loros would be fascinated. Sculpture was her obsession, and she had long since proven that she would sacrifice everything else in life if it meant she got to sculpt. She was bound to be around here somewhere, Carl assumed. She wouldn't miss the opportunity. Carl used Soul Sight to search for the demoness, and found her in one of the sculpting workshops, engrossed in a project. The orcs were there as well, but not Wendy, which was odd. Wendy, where did you get to today? Shopping. There is a list for the Alliance. I'm doing the pickups from our hired shoppers now, and then I will do deliveries. We've got the new sculptors here, if you want to meet them on the way. Sounds good, boss. I will see them before I go see Hugo and the others. That explained her enthusiasm. The big mage had new spells for her to study. He would have to keep an eye on Wendy, so the big man didn't steal her away for his own guild once she gained a rank or 2. Chapter 1137. Master Sculpting. Loros was beside herself with excitement. These were actual sculptors. People with the sculptor class direct from the system. She had gotten the warrior class, and sculpting was her obsession, so she didn't have all the cool special skills that these masters were likely to have. The sculptors came into the workspace when they had dropped off their luggage, and found that there were a dozen colors of stone, all overlord and totem ranked. We weren't sure what sort of stone you would like today, so I had Tion make a bunch for you to choose from. I do hope that the quality isn't an issue. We chose them for quality so that they could be upgraded by our runecrafters. A common statue made of mana jade or other mana-compatible materials can turn into a magnificently powerful item. Carl explained. Oh, that will work wonderfully. We have to be careful if a stone is too weak, but we can also add some abilities to our statues as we make them. Not to the extent that a blacksmith or others can, but our art is sculpting, not equipment making. Master Geralt explained. Each of the sculptors picked a piece, while Loros stood eagerly beside Carl, waiting for them to start. Are you not going to join us? Geralt asked. She shook her head. I've never seen someone with the actual sculptor class. I want to see how you do it. I carve all my pieces by hand, as I have the warrior class. So, this is a big thing to me. The dwarves chuckled as they realized it was her obsession, and each examined their stone, focusing magic into it. A few taps of hammer and chisel created the rough outline of the pieces, then a few more gave it crude details. The impacts had nothing to do with the actual progress, it was just a focusing method for the skill. And then, when the basic statues were created, the sculptors switched skills and began adding details in a wave over the pieces. From one end to the other, statues of dragons gained scales, bears gained fur, and a statue of the dwarven forge god gained such a perfect level of detail that it looked like the god's tunic was transparent with sweat, revealing skin and veins beneath. Even a few stray hairs from his beard had been detailed. So, that is what a true master can do. Loros breathed, her eyes firmly locked on the statue of the forge god. How he had managed to get the veins in the marble to line up with the veins on the statue's arms, Carl didn't know. But it was possible that he simply adjusted the stone itself to be precisely what he needed. Carl smiled at Geralt. Well, there is no doubt that is a true masterpiece of the sculptor's craft. But it's a bit of a shame if we put it away. How about I carve a blessing into the bottom of the base, and we put him on display? Geralt nodded, and grabbed the statue to put it up on a tilted display stand that either appeared from his storage or was created on the spot. Carl thought about what needed to go into the poem, and then began to rearrange the runes into one large decorative knot, without losing the meaning. Whiskey, ale, steel, and stone. The dwarves need the mountains as surely as flesh and bone. Melt the mithril, build your home. Patience and power make true art with a hammer's tone. Carl nodded in satisfaction as he gave up only 4 lines into the poem. He was only part dwarf, right? That should be enough of an excuse for the abruptness of his horrible poetry. He carved the design into the bottom of the statue, and sighed as the whole thing pulsed with golden divine light. Statue of the Forge God, totem rank, epic grade. Grants a bonus to all crafted items within 100 meters, dependent upon skill and materials used. The dwarves stared at the statue for a few seconds. What a strange description. It's epic grade, but it only has one vague bonus. Does that mean it's actually a divine blessing? Or is it just not telling us how much of a bonus or what sort? One of the sculptors asked.
Karl schrugged.
It should be a divine blessing of sorts. But I don't know what you'll get. Geralt stroked his beard and nodded. 100 meters. I guess we should put it in the tavern, then. It's right in the middle of town. Carl smiled. This wasn't really a town. But in a way it was, wasn't it? They would have to replace the staff at some point, with real people instead of illusions which Opal had programmed to run things for now. And at that point, what difference would there be between merchants and barmaids in the cavern and the same people on the outskirts of the city? The design even had multiple shops in it, mostly intended for the workers, but they could quickly become departments of the guild store. It would give the city guard constant headaches to see hundreds of people coming and going through the gates of the guild house every day. But the more that they had in stock, the more customers they were going to draw. All that was left was to have Ray acquire some tailors and leather workers, and they would have enough people to fully stock the shops. Maybe he could make it alliance-specific? No, that wouldn't give the guard any fewer headaches, with all the totem-ranked and mythic visitors who would be showing up at random to do their shopping. If there was one thing that Carl knew about them, it was that they liked doing their shopping in person, and not sending a personal shopper for anything that mattered to them. Groceries, yes. Furniture? Clothing? Or equipment? No. Well, it could remain 2/3 empty for now, and he would hire workers to tend the shops. Chapter 1138. Extra capacity. Carl wasn't the only one with thoughts about what could be done with all the extra space, though. Sapphire stormed into the workshop seconds later with a red-robed dragon priestess, who looked much too excited. Tell him what you told me, the blue dragon insisted. The goddess says that you made a space for us. The commander-rank red dragon insisted. Oh, that is brilliant. Yes, I believe that I did. Come with me. Gentlemen, we will return. You're all approved for the position, so feel free to grab what materials you need from storage, or use the extra stone here. Carl informed the sculptors. Then he grabbed the statue. We will place this on the way. It goes behind the bar of the tavern. He explained to the confused dragons. Quick question. What sort of strength do you need to just pick up and carry a life-size stone statue of a dwarf? In human form, I don't think I could do it, Sapphire asked. I'm no weaker like this than you are as a dragon. Don't worry. If it were too heavy, I would put it in inventory. Carl led the way to the tavern, where the helpful illusionary barmaid served both ladies honey wine in pint glasses the moment they entered. How did they even know? The red dragon asked. I often wonder that. They shouldn't know anything that their creator doesn't. But they're made by a glass-winged butterfly, and she simply knows things. Sapphire replied. It's in the book on how to stock a temple for the winter. I read it a few weeks ago while preparing a new play, Opal informed Carl. Carl's amusement made Sapphire gesture for him to speak his mind. She read a book on how to stock a temple for the winter to make one of her plays more realistic. The honey wine is one of the items in the list, so she assumed all clerics drink it. Sapphire laughed. Well, she's not wrong. The blue dragon moved a spare keg from the middle of the back shelf, and Carl replaced it with the statue, Then put the keg in an empty rack to the side. Perfect. That's nearly exactly in the middle of the city for maximum coverage of the statue's blessing. Now I have a spot in mind. It's near the front, closest to the market area, which is currently empty. What is the church's position on having the orphan staff vegetable stalls? We have nature clerics and druids to make the food, but we don't have enough cooks on staff at the moment to make dinner for everyone every day. I should probably hire more of them, but we only have 3 right now, Carl asked. The red dragon smiled. We actively encourage our children to hold productive positions in society. We can even have the older ones cook, if supplies and funding are sufficient. Carl patted her on the shoulder. There is no fear of running out of funds. I won't charge you for the supplies or the cooking implements, but I do need you to cook for 30 hungry dwarves 3 times a day, plus whoever you bring here for the orphanage. Sapphire laughed. So, that's your plan? Exploit child labor? Carl shook his head.
No.
Exploit orphan child labor. But I will pay them a proper wage. That's half the staffing that we need covered, and we don't even need to look for them. They've already been found. Now I just need to find some barmaids and likely some extra cleaners. Unless there are enough orphans in the city for that job too. The 2 dragons began to laugh as Carl waited for an answer. There are hundreds of orphan children in the city, and that's just inside the city. Working conditions in Drod, especially in the sprawl, aren't great. Plus, crime is high. It leaves a fair number of children for the church, and they're overflowing their current building. The red dragon replied. Well, it looks like you've got some expansion work to do, matron. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. Blackclaw. At least, that's what my name translates to in common. Matron Blackclaw, then. We will also provide magical rings to help the children clean. This whole area will need to be maintained. Even the empty areas will need at least twice a month dusting. But with the rings, you should only need 10 or so children to keep up. If the dwarves are really messy, we will approve more cleaners. Oh, and one on the early morning shift at the tavern to clean before breakfast every day. We will serve the food your orphanage makes as well, but I will get proper staff for the tavern.
Carl explained.
We have a few who have aged out of the orphanage as ascended demons. They're working part-time in the sprawl, so I will ask them if they want to work here. I have heard that you hired caretaker Joe as well. Matron Blackclaw asked. Carl turned to look toward the house. I'm not heartless enough to kick her out of her home, even though we bought it from the city. She's still caretaker Joe, and we found her a newt beastkin to work as her assistant. If you 2 know each other, you can find her in the house. Her room is on the 3rd floor, but she's always busy with something. You'll have to get someone to let you up, though. The gargoyles might not let anyone but guild members go up unattended. Sapphire sighed. Do you just take in every random person you meet? Of course not. But these ones were recommended by the Red Dragon God. Should be fine. That reminds me, did you find a chance to visit the library here? I know you had to pass through it to come visit. The blue dragon's eyes sparkled. It is a wonderful library. Many ancient and rare tomes, much better than I had expected out of a guild house. I will show my apprentices to it later. Apprentices should read in their spare time. It's good for the mind. Then she paused. You just sidetracked me from my questions about hiring policy by mentioning the library. Devious little demon. The red dragon laughed. The monster man has quite a reputation in the city. He's not as open about who he hires as you might think, but he's got the god's own luck when it comes to finding employees. He managed to get a Grandmaster demonic blacksmith simply because the man came in that gate and happened to smell the forge fire. Ashbringer stuck his head out of his forge when he heard someone talking about him, then waved to the priestess. He already knew the orphanage matron. They used her kids to do the shopping for the alliance that Wendy was out delivering. Chapter 1139. Wedding Planning. In a private room of Supreme Lady Matilda's castle, the ladies of the Darklight host were in the middle of complete and utter chaos. Matilda's method of planning was to bring out every possible option side by side and see what her visions said about how those things would work together, then ask the others what they thought to see if that would change the visions. What about this color for the bridesmaids? the ancient chaos dragon asked. I like that one. Kara commended her, but everyone else just looked confused. You're not holding anything that we can see, Dana informed her. Oh, and it's such a pretty shade. Shame that nobody can see it. Feel how smooth it is. Dana reached out, then stopped when her fingers touched something impossibly soft, almost like silk, but it felt like it partially merged with your finger as you touched it, like running your finger through warm water. Tiffany sighed. You wouldn't believe the fight she put up when I first told her I wouldn't wear that in public. I don't even know what she thinks it looks like. Dana smiled at the vampire. Somehow, I suspect she's going to tell us that she foresees great fortune for the bridesmaids if they wear it to the wedding. Kara gave Dana an affirming gesture, while Matilda laughed. Well, you could call it that, but let's move on to another combination. The Chaos Badger relayed to her sisters what she thought the dress looked like, and Ray immediately began to pout. That dress was spectacular, and she couldn't even see the real thing. But part of that was because the dress didn't exist fully in reality. It was like being partially incorporeal but still solid enough to touch things a little. If you tried to damage the dress, Kara's thoughts said that you would pass right through it, which in Kara's mind made it ideal for a bridesmaid's dress. Remy considered the potential. It was like a non-Newtonian fluid, but in reverse. It was solid until you applied too much force, and then is simply phased out of reality. The problem was that the color was one that didn't exist in any light spectrum that their eyes could see. The light that it reflected only existed in the chaos plane. Matilda brought out another dress. This one was almost white, but in the way that white light was white. It radiated white to the point that you couldn't see any detail to it. Then, she moved the dress, and the colors shimmered, flickering like the rainbow. Matilda frowned at the dress, then did something that made the light fade. Fey silk. It's lovely, but if you get the mana attunement wrong, the colors get all wonky, she explained. Ray took the dress from her, and Dana waited patiently as she was changed into the 50th new dress of the morning. Oh, that is lovely. You can fly, right? We should get you some wings to go with it. Matilda cheered. How about a shawl? It would flap in the breeze as she floated down the aisle. Kara suggested. Oh, that is great. Yes, 1 second. Dana waited for someone to explain, as only Matilda and the other beasts could hear Kara's mental messages. She says a shawl with the dress would be right. Matilda flipped through dozens of gossamer pieces of cloth in the next minute, then held up her choice. Here, put this on. Yes, pale violet flowers on simple white. The classics are always the best luck. Ray put the cloth over Dana's shoulders, and she found herself floating involuntarily. But she could still move normally, she just wasn't touching the ground. I need one of those too. I hate getting other people's mud on my scales. Remy demanded. Matilda laughed and passed her a red one, then took it back and held it up before Dana. Would you consider red and gold as wedding colors? Red is a good luck color for the day. Dana shrugged. I wouldn't object too strongly. Some of the demons I've met use red for wedding gowns, and they look lovely. Naksha nodded. Black dragons use red wedding dresses as well, and white dragons use black for special occasions. That made sense. They wore white every day, so they would have to pick something else if they wanted people to know that they were celebrating. Matilda gave Remy a different red one, with the same effect, and the Naga silently celebrated this small victory over filth. Sure, she could fly in spirit snake form, but that form didn't have arms. This one had 4. It was clearly the superior option for an alchemist. Dana was just being rearranged into a red gown when a sudden thought came to her mind. I got a skill book from the dungeon, but I never used it. I wanted to have Carl duplicate it for Ray, and then I forgot about it. She gasped. Lotus laughed. Ha! They say that I am infectious, but it's the Carl who is corrupting everyone and making them forgetful. Ray laughed. Well, if you give it to me, I will make Carl lean it and teach us both. Then make him make a copy of the spell book. No, 2 copies, so that we can give one to the Blue Dragons for their records, and still have one for the library at the guild house. Dana added. Matilda nodded eagerly. Tell him to take in the Blue Dragons. They will make great guild members. Having a blue dragon to protect your books is the best thing you can do to guard knowledge. Carl, learn this book, teach me the thing, then make 2 more books, and take the blue dragon into the guild. The Chaos Dragon says she's good luck. Ray informed Carl, startling him out of a discussion about items that would be needed to place the overflow of orphans into a new home. Lady Sapphire, how would you like to join the Darklight host? I can offer you a few benefits and 1 super exclusive skill. Carl offered, halting the conversation. What brings on this offer? She asked suspiciously. Lady Matilda says that you're good luck. And Ray just gave me a skill book to learn and copy. I know how blue dragons feel about those, even if they're not inscriptionists. Actually, make it 2 bits of exclusive knowledge. I bet that you can learn both. Carl explained. I'm listening. Chapter 1140, Lady Sapphire. Carl sent a guild invite, then took out the book of Golem duplication and immediately learned it. The look on Sapphire's face when the book vanished was priceless, but she still accepted the offer. Guild member added, Sapphire. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill book. Will be transferred to the Curious Maiden Sapphire. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, eternal lightning. Will be transferred to the Curious Maiden Sapphire. There we go. The promised super exclusive skill. Only blue dragons and Thor have been able to learn it so far. You need very high affinity for both holy and lightning magic, and blue dragon breath is lightning. The other skill allows you to make skill books of any skill that, similar to an inscriptionist. The skill goes well with rune crafting, as we already know the language, so we can do it much faster than others. Sapphire's eyes glowed with divine favor, and the dragon laughed out loud. I think I understand now why the dragon gods like you so much. You make no sense at all. The red dragon priestess nodded energetically. She had absolutely no idea what was going on, but she could feel the divine reaction to whatever Carl had done. So it had to have pleased the god of knowledge. Carl focused for a moment and taught the golem duplication skill to Ray through her space, but teaching it back to Dana would have to wait until they were face to face again. I don't suppose that someone would tell me what is going on? Does this affect the schedule to order the furniture for the orphanage? The red dragon priestess asked. Carl shook his head. Not at all. I will send a runner to order it all now and get the building stocked before the evening so you can move in. I put furniture in many of the units with an illusion, but this building is still empty, and none of the others would be suitable for an orphanage's setup as they are. I just inducted the lovely Miss Sapphire into the guild and taught her a unique skill for blue dragons. A unique skill for blue dragons? How do you know something like that? It's actually an evolved form of the refreshing lightning barrier that the lightning Sero have. If you help them evolve with holy magic, there is a chance that their skill will evolve as well. In Thor's case, his did, and it's highly compatible with the blue dragons. Sapphire huffed, and lightning crackled around her mouth before the eternal lightning barrier formed. Then he taught me how to write skill books for any skill that I know, and the goddess got really excited. She added, "What does that have to do with the orphanage?" she asked, confused. Nothing. One of my guild members gave me a book of golem duplication, and it reminded me to do all that other stuff. The red dragon shook her head. This guild is a strange one, but I can tell already that it's going to be an adventure for the children. Now, is this the building? I can see that working. How much renovation are we allowed to do to it? Carl shrugged. It's made of totem-ranked stone, so the changes that you are physically able to make are limited. But I don't mind what you do to the interior. Repaint, change the flooring, put in new lights, whatever works best for your situation. I know that most of the orphans will want more light than this region normally has, but it should be good for helping them get to sleep when the cave is always dark. Carl agreed. The priestess smiled. You have a good point. We're not going to be able to take down the walls if they're that strong. But that should also make it quiet inside, unlike the wooden buildings in the sprawl, where you can hear people stomping from 3 floors away. Carl frowned in sympathy. That sounded truly horrible, especially for a house full of children. Carl led the way in, and the 2 dragons examined the interior of the building, which was designed to be Singe worker apartments. Well, this is perfect. We don't actually need the kitchen facilities in most of the units, as the kids are too young to cook for themselves. But I think that if we reorganize it, we can room one older child with the younger ones. Right now, we've got them on rotating helper duties. But that could be changed to an assigned group to help with their studies and late-night issues like a need for snacks. Well, when there are actually snacks in the house. Most of the time, the orphanages are operating on the standard rice and beans diet, and that's not really snack food.
Karl chuckled.
Oh, ye of little creativity. If you add a bit of spice and then pan-fry them, you can make excellent snacks with the leftovers. At home, the church acolytes made leftover balls to feed to the horses, but Lotus learned that you can save some for yourself and fry them into a spicy snack for later. Green dragon acolyte or silver? The red dragon priestess asked. Green naturally, but I wouldn't have thought that the silver dragon clerics were on that list. The two dragons chuckled. They get lost in their magical studies and exhaust themselves until they can't walk. So, they like to have something to eat with them. That makes sense. The red dragon clerics seem like the we eat on a schedule sorts, and the blue dragons would lose their mind if someone brought snacks into the library, so they definitely have a meal schedule.
Karl joked.
Sticky little acolyte fingerprints are the bane of our existence. Sapphire agreed. Now, are all the sweets like this? The red dragon asked, bringing them back on track. Karl shook his head. Only the first 2 floors. The top floor is larger suites with a second bedroom. But I know how the orphanages are always crowded, and I have an idea on how to use those well. Sapphire laughed. Just the fact that there are so many bathrooms will make the children cry in joy. Most orphanages have a boys' and girls' common bathroom and showers. If they're lucky, they might have them on multiple floors. Chapter 1141. Infinite Golem Glitch. 15 minutes later, Misty and Rain, the Dryad furniture makers, were at the entrance to the upgraded workspace, staring at the area in wonder. This is incredible. So much space. Greetings, Guild Leader Karl, priestesses. What did you need us for today? Please say that it's a full decoration of all these buildings. Business has been slow lately. Everyone spent their money exporting items for the Bomgan War, and most of them haven't returned yet, so there's nobody ordering anything. The Elder Dryad explained. Karl smiled at the excited Dryad. Not all of them. Some of the new residents have their own furniture. First, we need you to do the orphanage building for as many as you consider reasonable to house inside. If you can make the top floor double dorms, 2 beds in each of the large bedrooms, 1 on either wall, the others can be much higher density. Then, single rooms for how many? Priestess. Just me. We're short on clergy, but the older children help out, and we pay them until they go off to find their own work. It helps get them ready for the world. She replied. All right, a suite for the matron on the main floor, I think. Then suites for the older kids at the top so they pass by all the younger kids and their supervisors on the way down. We will let Matron Blackclaw sort the sleeping arrangements, but we will need plenty of beds. Workbenches for schoolwork in the common areas. What else? A nursery. Many will drop off newborns at the orphanages. Then a convalescent room for the red dragons. It is customary that they give birth at an orphanage, as the church raises all of our children. The red dragon priestess added. Misty smiled. Don't worry, matron. This will be the greatest orphanage that you've ever had the pleasure of managing. Will this be the teacher? Sapphire shook her head. I am one of the new crafters for the guild. I will call on one of my brothers to teach here. A strong male influence helps balance the attitudes of the children and keeps them from acting out. If you have trouble recruiting one, tell them that we will provide them with access to the guild library. It's not the biggest they'll ever see, but it's better than 2 shelves in their room. Karl offered. That should be enough. Our God approves of spreading knowledge, so teachers aren't too hard to find. Sapphire agreed. Misty looked over the small town in the cave. How many of these rooms are in use? About 3 dozen. Talk to the craftsmen, and they can tell you what they need and what unit they're in. It's all on the guild's tab.
Karl explained.
The 2 dryads took off. Misty headed for the orphanage, while Rain went to the Sculptors area to take orders for the upgrading of the houses. Her mother would have her hands full with the big project, but the dwarves were usually pretty Spartan in their requests, so it would mostly be beds that they wanted. Dwarves even preferred stone or metal couches with cushions on them, instead of wooden. If there were demons, it might be more work for her as a dryad, but she saw a lot of short people. With that handled, Carl was free to begin the essential tests of his own new skill. First, to see which spells the skill would actually affect. The golems came out as 4 summons, but the bodyguards were still only 2, and it didn't clone the epic guard or the haint either. That was somewhat limited, but it should give Dana both her golem and greater golem summons at 4 each. That was no insignificant force. In his mind, Ray celebrated. She had just realized that the spell gave her an infinite golem glitch. If she made enemies explode with blood destruction, she could awaken them with Queen of the Damned and use them as blood golems. But the spell should double the number, which would leave her with twice as many golems as enemies. All she had to do was keep finding more targets, and she could double the world's population entirely with blood golems, until they started to rot and smell bad. That would be a problem that she could sort out when the time came. It was just a shame that she couldn't teach the golems or the blood golems how to make clothing. They were utterly useless that way. The spectral knights would try if she ordered them to, but they had no sense of art or delicacy. Lousy as tailors. Better to have them collect materials. With the testing done, Carl dismissed the extra summons, and then led the priestesses to the tavern so that he could write out the golem duplication skill. With some luck, he could get that to advance by a tier, and turn it into summon duplication or something similar. But the skill master ability hadn't activated in a while, and Carl was beginning to suspect that either he had lost favor from it, or it was stuck waiting for a skill that couldn't be advanced yet. That had happened before, multiple upgrades all at once when a skill advanced. At least, Carl was fairly sure it had been the case with Skill Master itself when he advanced it through the skill tree and then immediately got another advancement. The first copy, Carl handed to Sapphire, who simply stared at the skill book in wonder. This really is a most wonderful skill. I wonder if I can use these skill books to teach advanced classes? What if I taught lay on hands to a warrior? Would they become eligible to become a paladin? Or if I taught them sense truth, would they become a crusader? She pondered. Try it right before they go into a dungeon. Most class advancements become available the next time you enter a system-linked instance or trial. Carl suggested. The blue dragon sighed wistfully. With this, we might single-handedly break the warrior imbalance and bring the thirst for knowledge back to the world. Teach them that there is more to life than cleave and guard. Chapter 1142. Solving Imbalances. The mere thought that she might rid the world of warriors who only cared about 2 skills in their entire skill tree was enough to send the blue dragon into blissful daydreams. It was a lifelong ambition of her branch of the clergy. Carl worked on another copy of Golem Duplication for Dana to use, and then passed it to Ray with a promise to make her one to sell once he had a bit of spare time. First, he had plans to recruit blue dragons to the library. What if I made a collection of skill books that are likely to cause advanced classes? You could bring in librarians to make copies, and then the Blue Dragon clergy could start an initiative to advance as many warriors as possible. You could even do it out of Xylaz, where there are so many more warriors with excess resources. Carl suggested. Sapphire smirked at him. You're not even trying to pretend that this isn't an attempt to claim more dragons for the Darklight host. Carl shrugged. Sometimes it's fun to play along. Sometimes it's just easier to make sure everyone understands. How do silver dragons feel about new spells and skills? Both dragons roared with laughter. Even more strongly than the librarians do. The blue dragons want to know, and want the hard copy. Silver dragons wish to know the spell, and then they intend to use it. Sapphire agreed. So, we need silver dragons here as well. That would be a good combination. We could make another dungeon team, for them to test out and practice new skills to see what will trigger class advancements. Carl suggested. He could see the possibilities running through Sapphire's mind, then the very moment that a brilliant plan came to her. You know, there is no actual rule against asking the acolytes to join a study. They just need to meet the requirements to advance, right? We could grab all those warriors that the red dragons keep around and train as guards for merchants and such. They are already being trained by the clergy, so there is no harm in making them into something more useful than a basic warrior template," she suggested. Matron Blackclaw looked vaguely offended. The mercenary guards that the red dragon clerics trained were chosen from the finest fighters among the orphans, and the red dragons did not appreciate others calling them useless. But Sapphire was already making plans, and wondering if she should call home to the Sholaha and Kapi region temples to gather volunteers. Between the two nations, there should be at least 10,000 warriors in training at any given time. Even a 1% volunteer rate would give them statistically significant data. The only issue was that they needed them all to be the same ranks so that they could send healers with them into test dungeons and properly vet the results. That was a clergy issue, not a Carl issue. All he had to do was make sure that there was a variety of skill books for the blue dragons to copy so that they could properly test their students, and the theory that it only took one appropriate skill to trigger a class change away from the basic group. Carl knew that there were a few skills that would help warriors advance to a better class, but the ones that Sapphire had in mind were mostly tanking classes, paladins and crusaders. But Carl knew that there should be other warrior-type classes, ones that blended with rogue, druid, ranger, or other classes. The issue was that he could only make and teach skills that he already knew, so he needed to help diversify the skills of his beasts before he would be able to teach the warriors really incredible skills. Hawk scoffed at Carl's thoughts. Warriors were just meat puppets, weren't they? They existed to be taunted from the air, and they couldn't even shoot back. But Thor had different ideas. Wasn't Sister Ray a stealthy warrior when she started? Her initial abilities were mostly just sneaking up on people and punching holes in them. Maybe that was a rogue instead? But surely warriors could be taught to do that too, couldn't they? Warriors could also use bows so they could do ranger things. Just not well. That was it. Warriors were just the crappy version of all the other physical fighting classes. Wasn't that just too cruel, though? Why would so many people get the worst class? At least give them a better barrier so they could be a good tank or something. Hawk couldn't argue with that. Warriors were a prey species for sure. Carl tried not to laugh as the pair slagged the warriors. Their ideas were helping him plan what he could do to reduce the number of basic warriors, though. It might only take a single skill for another class that was just compatible enough with them that they would push through on a new path. The new class might not be ultra-rare or powerful, but it should be a step up from the basic classes that were most common. For example, the whole group of specialty rogues that they had doing runecrafting in Xylaz. They had different skills than regular rogues, and if the base class could create their own solid weapons from nothing, they would gain a distinct advantage with the skills they already had. At least situationally. So, the next thing that Carl needed to do was to either burn some skill points getting random books, or start combining the basic abilities of everyone until he got new skills he could teach warriors. If he gave them a beast space, it would most likely make them beast rangers or something similar to it. But if he gave them a combination of mental fortitude and an attack spell, they should be able to become a battle mage of some sort. If they were bright enough. Not all warriors were stupid, but all mages had to be at least moderately intelligent. Chapter 1143. Just the right skill. He had been focusing on trade skills for so long that Carl had nearly forgotten the potential of the basic skills to other elites. Well, people, since everyone here had a good chance at the system, not just the precious few. Come to think of it, he didn't really have many basic skills. The beasts each only had a few, and they were very specialized. But he could try. He had Rend and Ray had Spear. She didn't use it often, but she had it. The two combined fairly easily, and Crosscut skill formed in Carl's mind. That was still a warrior-type skill, but a good one. What if he combined Crosscut with Walk on Air? That made Blade Dance an epic grade skill. Now, that might not give someone a new class, but it really did sound like it might awaken some sort of upgraded warrior at the lower ranks. The more powerful you got, the less likely Carl thought that it would be that a new skill would improve your class. After all, the mythic tanks had skills like limited invulnerability, and it hadn't done anything for them to get out of the warrior class lock. Well, Deve was the only one who had that skill for certain, and he was a druid, but the concept was the same. Carl started to write out the Blade Dance skill as they waited for the dryads to finish their work on the furniture, and found that it was remarkably short. For some reason, warrior skills were always the easiest ones to write. Rend was barely more than a pamphlet in skill book form. Oh, that wasn't a bad idea. Short books were best. What if he combined Gravity Slam with Chain Lightning? Lightning Stomp was a skill that Thor could get excited about. So Carl taught it to him right away, though he wasn't sure that it was the sort of skill that would be far enough from a warrior's specialties to count. Just seeing Thor happily stomping around his space with crackling lightning boots on his feet was worth the effort. He already knew that you couldn't just teach the warriors a wizard spell directly. They wouldn't be compatible. But other physical skills should be a bit more versatile. This was harder than he thought that it would be. Mostly because he had no idea what skills would actually work to trigger a class advancement that wasn't just Spicy Warrior. But still, it was not a simple task. You could try teaching them Spicy Tornado, maybe around themselves with a spinning blade? Warriors seem like they would enjoy lotus spinning dances. Hawk suggested, "You're probably not wrong. We can try that later and see if they can use Flaming Vortex after a few tweaks." Carl agreed. Carl finished Blade Dance, and Sapphire immediately took the book from him, then used a skill to open it so she could read it without risking using it. You know, even if you do use it, you can just make another copy. I was thinking that might make for an advanced warrior class. It's intended to be used with a spear, so it might make something more noble than hack and slash. Carl explained. The Red Dragon matron laughed. "I like how you two are so in tune that Carl just starts making books while we wait. Even though the plan to bring in warrior trainees isn't finalized." Sapphire shrugged. "It will happen. Now that we can teach them more skills easily, we should be able to change their futures." Carl nodded and then thought of a new combination. If he combined Rampage with Fireball and Iron within the body improvement skill that had started his adaptation away from mostly human, that should make a good skill. Elemental's Wrath Epic Grade Transformation skill. Ignores 10% of each attack's damage, adds 250% fire damage to all attacks, causes Berserk, increasing strength by 100%. We need the Ophelia here, Hawk noted. A giant flaming, extra Berserk bear would be hilarious. Ooh! Teach it to Kara. I want to see a Berserk Kara. Remy cheered in Carl's mind. That was a scary thought. Did you have another idea? Sapphire asked. There is a skill called Elemental's Wrath, an epic grade transformation skill. It's a Berserk state that adds damage reduction and fire damage. I'm not sure if it's something I should make for the warriors or not. Matron Blackclaw chuckled. You can make it for me if you want. A rampaging red dragon might be what it takes to make these kids behave for more than a day. Champion Carl offers knowledge, skill, Elemental's Wrath. Will be transferred to the strict Matron Blackclaw. The red dragon began to laugh. Oh yes, this is wonderful. Those little brats won't stand a chance during combat training. Carl frowned. I am trusting you not to abuse this newfound ability. The matron waved off his concern. I have been responsible for the military training for promising orphans in Drod for many years. Rest assured that I won't be using Rampage to beat children. Well, not young ones. You get my point. Sapphire snickered softly at the matron's excitement. That is what happens when you flip the switch within a red dragon. They go from patient orphanage matron to battle-crazed drill instructor in the blink of an eye. Carl nodded. I see that now. I will make another copy of the book later to add to the library, just in case we need to make more copies for future visitors. Sapphire smiled. I will call more of my sisters over to make duplicates for the Dragon God's library. They should be coming with the volunteers anyhow, but I will ensure that they send sisters with the inscription skill so they can copy the books. Lord Drod was not going to be particularly happy with their training plan. But the dungeon here was royal ranked, so they could test weaker trainees with a better chance of advancing. It was only logical to do the project here instead of in Xylaz. Though, if it worked well, they could expand it to the Guild Alliance members and start sorting out their imbalance. That was nearly 1,000 potential volunteers who were already familiar with the eccentricities of the Darklight host and eager to make a name for themselves among the dungeon teams. Carl focused on the possibilities as he worked on finding another exceptional combination. Not the chaos that a rampaging Kara could cause. She was very happy with her new skill, If Carl didn't want her to have it, he shouldn't have learned it himself. Shared skills worked both ways. Chapter 1144. Theme chosen. The process of picking the perfect wedding theme was not a fast one. It wasn't that either Dana or Matilda were trying to be difficult, but there were so many options, and every time someone got a great idea of what to add to the ceremony, that changed how one of the ideas would work with the others, and then they had to adjust it all over again. Fortunately for them, they had Opal on their side. She could recreate everything that they visualized so that everyone could do a live critique of how it worked. Dana knew that the ceremony wouldn't be small, as they had many friends and allies. But her idea of reasonable and Matilda's idea of reasonable were very different. Even Naksha thought that it might be wise to invite the entire Golden Divine Academy to the wedding. When they had a church wedding, they typically invited the entire church in their city. So, dragons typically got married with 5,000 to 10,000 people in attendance. It wasn't a big ceremony unless they were leaders of the church, but it was expected that everyone would take an hour or two out of their day to support the couple with their presence. They also cast a group blessing on the ceremony to bring good luck and fertility. That part was another point of contention. Given the amount of divine favor that their group attracted, if she really did agree to the blessing, how long would it be before she was pregnant? Was she ready for that? And what species would the children even be? Not that she had a particular basis, but she had long found that Carl's cat demon transformation was much more comfortable to sleep next to, and she wasn't sure how she felt about the chance of having kittens. Or would they be fox kits? A hybrid? Matilda thought that the whole issue was funny. She was Dana's age when she had her first clutch, and she had turned them over to the red dragons to raise, as was custom for all high priestesses at the time. That way, they didn't grow up in unearned privilege, or gain an unseemly attitude thanks to a parent's wealth. You know, that is an option. We've got an orphanage at the Druid Guildhouse now. You could have the red dragons raise your kittens, so you wouldn't have to stop traveling with us. They would be right there, and the dragons don't deny you visitation. Everyone knows who is a child of clergy and who is an actual orphan anyhow. Ray suggested. Wait, back up. Since when do we have an orphanage at the Guildhouse? Dana asked. Ray shrugged. About 3 days now. Time flows differently there than it does here. Carl arranged it after we left because he needed people to work the shops for the new crafters in the expanded workshop village. He's even got leatherworker and tailors coming to slave for me. Tessa gave Ray a disapproving look, and the spider relented. Do the work of crafting the boring stuff for me, she amended. Where did they even find tailors up to your standard? Philia asked. Ray puffed up in pride. The city governor talked to a friend in Nerid, and they sent over a whole group of spider beastkin for us. They will know how to work with proper materials, for sure.
Dana sighed.
Let me get this right. You found out that Carl was bringing in more craftsmen to make items for the guild store, and then had him talk to the city's governor, who brought in a whole group of workers from another nation, on the other side of the continent, just because you thought that spider beastkin would be better at working with spider silk. Ray smiled, showing her pointed teeth. He really is good to me. They even found a whole group of overlords so that they can make the pretty stuff that all the Alliance members want. That gives me all the time I need to decorate my Dana for her wedding. She was quite pleased with this setup. She had sent over 100 different design patterns for them to get started with, as well as 1,000 bolts of silk. If they started to run out, she would adjust her supply plans. But 100 different dress and suit designs should be enough that only 10 people in the Alliance had the same basic design, and they could customize each of them as they worked so they wouldn't all be identical. The plan was coming together wonderfully. It wouldn't be long before the whole world was cocooned in her silk. Kara laughed a little at her sister's thoughts, then held up some white roses with blood-red tips on the petals that seemed to bleed down the side. Oh, those are good for the tables. Excellent call, Kara. Tessa complimented. The flowers were a specialty of the red dragons, and they would go well with the red wedding gown that Dana had decided on. Going ultra-traditional with the red gown and veil had been deemed both excellent luck and appealing to Dana. The only change she wanted from tradition was a thinner veil so that she could actually see what was going on, and not just what was right at her feet. Dana cleared her throat. So, are we agreed? black and white for the Darklight host as the main theme, and then red and gold for the bridal party? Reversed for the bridesmaids. Everyone nodded in agreement, and the final plans were started. They had a dress for Dana already. Now they needed them for everyone else. Ray briefly wondered if they should make Kara transform for the ceremony, or if she was fine in beast form. Opal would naturally be coming as a butterfly, but she was already sparkly. But Kara was black and white, so she did fit the theme. They could just throw her in a bubble bath with Lotus to get her clean. Weddings were complicated. Dana wasn't worried so much about the details of Kara's appearance as she was about the proposal by Matilda that they hold the wedding in a separate space in Sihosesa, so that she could invite all of the 20,000 guests that she thought should be there. For just a moderate ceremony, as she called it. Chapter 1145. Slightly less tiny world. Unaware of the scale of the wedding being planned, and confident in his companions to come to a decision that would make Dana happy, Carl focused on improving the selection of goods in the Alliance store. They had an organizational system now. One of the Lala Bunnies and 2 of the Dragonkin runecrafters were on sales duty at the Alliance house, while Carl moved between houses as needed, but mostly worked in the Drod house, while Sapphire worked in the basement of the Xylaz Alliance house with the others and her 2 grandchildren. Some of them were getting eager to find out when Remy would be able to help them advance. But she was busy with the others, planning the wedding, so Carl had no idea when she would be able to make more potions. The reagents were growing well, though. But today was a big day for both Carl and Remy, though Remy hadn't realized it yet. Today was the day that the hippies were coming to decide if Carl's tiny world was a suitable spot to live, or if they should move somewhere else. They would be the last of the additional crafters that were needed to keep everything running when the beasts were busy. But there was one last step that Carl needed to finish before they arrived. The tiny world had been made at Overlord rank, and he hadn't expanded it, nor had he added the powers of the fundamental rules of the universe to the space. At least some level of fundamental rules would be needed to properly grow totem-ranked resources, and Carl intended to focus on adding mana manipulation to the space. There currently wasn't anyone in it, which was perfect for his needs. After finishing a whole batch of warrior-focused skill damage and attack speed increasing accessories, Carl moved himself into the tiny world and closed the entrance so that nothing would unbalance the area as he worked. The first thing he needed to do was improve the area of the tiny world. It was already massive for their purposes, but compared to what he knew it could be, it felt lacking. With a thought, the world began to reshape, and Carl focused on all of the myriad ways that mana could be altered or manipulated to create, destroy, and even simulate life. The last was the most complex of them all, but the basis of the tiny world was mana manipulation, and the illusionary domain that Opal used was a pure expression of the fundamental rule. Taken to extremes, Carl knew that he could improve even Opal's prodigious skills with this ability. But for now, he was weaving it into the nature of the tiny world as he carefully remade the spell without allowing it to collapse or damage any of the rare plants that they were growing. That was possibly the most important part. Some of the plants were literally irreplaceable, as the anomalies they had come from no longer existed. Unless Remy or the others had a viable copy in their spaces, these could very well be the last ones in existence. The area covered by the tiny world soared, and Carl found himself with an irresistible urge to transform. Avatar shifted him into the image of a world dragon, and suddenly the manipulation of the tiny world became effortless. The reshaping of nature was the greatest innate skill of the species, and even as an avatar, Carl had no issues mimicking their creation skills. Skill Master 5 Activation, Golem Duplication 2. Carl smiled as he worked. That was what he expected. Mana manipulation and illusion combined to create the golems. So, the more he understood about the concept, the more easily he would be able to create more of them. He wouldn't be shocked if other skills advanced soon as well. Carl sat with his eyes closed, using his other senses to let him know how the plants were doing as he mentally envisioned an expansion to the tiny world. Not just simple grasslands. No, he expanded the mountain range at the edge of the space behind him, then added a village within the mountain, complete with everything that dwarven crafters could ask for. He had practice with that, after all. Then he expanded the forests, including some taller, denser sections, which would be perpetually dark at the base, perfect for Ray and those with her sensibilities. The swamp was expanded, the fields. Carl even added a few smaller lakes and a winding river to the space. Through it all, he wove the fundamental rule of mana manipulation as he struggled to comprehend it. The tiny world was becoming more realistic by the second, and the mana storage crystals he had created were pulsing not just with energy, but with something that almost felt like the haint, just before it gained sentience. So that was mana. Carl had misunderstood at first, but now the lessons about the dark times and resurgences began to make more sense to him. Mana wasn't alive, it was pure energy. But it had a pulse of its own, like a living thing. To truly master manipulating mana, you didn't master using massive amounts of it. You merged the pulse of the mana with your spells until the two were inseparable, and then you could bend reality to your will without using a skill at all. You didn't need to use mana from your body, just shape what was around you and make it solid. In a way, it was similar to what you did with illusions, but a basic illusion was a crude layer on top of the flow of mana. The purest of illusions were living, breathing constructs that nobody would recognize as an illusion at all. Only the most adept would realize that they weren't a living person. Carl opened the tiny world to draw in more mana to work with, as he had expanded the space too far for what he had available without depleting the beast spaces. Then he continued to remake the space into the perfect paradise for magical beasts and plants. It was going to be glorious when he finished. Perhaps he should build a city so they could move more people in? No, that could wait until he was a myth, and he needed to go on longer trips than a day in the dungeons for crafting materials. Chapter 1146. Unexpected Side Effect. Guild Leader Carl, can you contact the ladies of your guild? We have a few questions for them. Guild Master Hugo asked moments after Carl decided that the tiny world had reached the limits of what he could do today. Fundamental rule understanding improved, mana manipulation 24%. Carl let the notification fade as he answered. They are busy planning a wedding. If it is something that I can help with, I will. We don't have any Overlord-ranked healers available at the moment, though. Carl replied, "Oh, that's not the issue. Where are you at right now? This would be easier in person. Meet me at the manor. I will make lunch." Or have someone make lunch for them. Carl hadn't cooked for himself in ages. So, he first went to the kitchen at the Druid Guild house and pleaded with the abbeys to let him steal lunch and snacks to take with him. Then, he returned to the Xylaz Alliance house and waited for the burly mage to arrive. Hugo wasn't alone when he arrived. He had a warrior with him whose armor had been beaten into submission, and an Overlord-ranked mage wearing one of Ray's robes. "Tell the guild master what you told me," Hugo demanded the moment they entered, skipping the small talk. "All right. Well, you know how the ladies of the Darklight host triggered a special event in the dungeon when they entered?" The warrior began. Carl nodded. "With an extra boss and all, yes. The three groups who went there after didn't see the change, so we thought it was a one-time thing. But today we were short a mage, so we brought Ruth, who was with their team that day. And from the moment that we entered, the whole dungeon was on hard mode difficulty. The rest of the Overlord group your ladies accompanied went ahead of schedule, and they're inside now with a totem-ranked healer. It's triggered for them too. Anyone who got the achievement, and who enters the dungeon again, triggers hard mode." The warrior explained frantically. Carl nodded. "And this is a bad thing? It sounds like it's a great chance to get better loot. Now that you know it will happen, you can plan teams appropriately." Ruth laughed and patted Carl on the shoulder. "You're missing the important part, guild leader. We can't plan an appropriate team to do it again. We don't have the right classes or the necessary abilities. Our team managed to finish the dungeon, but it took 8 hours and we barely survived. Unless we suddenly have a whole different dungeon team, there is no way that we can do that every week. The hard mode difficulty requires that we either bring your ladies, or that those of us who got the achievement never go in that dungeon again." She informed him in a dry tone. Carl shrugged. "I can likely help you resolve that issue. Both the classes and the abilities. You see, the Blue Dragons have an experiment going to help the warriors change classes. We think that we can improve the tanks to Paladins and Crusaders. Then we will work on skills for the others to make them better than basic warrior damage dealers. But as far as abilities, I can make accessories with the core skills you will need until the tanks can advance. It's not a big deal for me to make them all amulets or something with limited invulnerability on it. If they're beastkin or dragonkin, they should be able to use bestial regeneration as well. That will take a load off the healers, who we can give extra mana storage and more efficient healing items to. Hard mode isn't impossible, as you proved already. It's just a matter of gear and composition. Hugo took a seat and placed a bottle of rum from his inventory on the table, then poured himself a healthy dose into a cup of coffee. What are the odds that you can make warriors into paladins? The class is all defensive and healing skills, but it really is perfect for the tanks, he asked. Almost guaranteed. Is there a system-linked trial or area that isn't a dungeon here? Carl asked. Hugo nodded. The Dragon Temple has a trial ground for testing cleric improvements. We can ask them to borrow it. Carl smiled. I will tell them that it's a project of the Blue Dragons, and they shouldn't give us too much hassle. Bring more of the Overlord-ranked tanks here, and we will see who can become a paladin. Sapphire, we need you upstairs. I found Overlord-ranked volunteers to become paladins, if you can teach them to lay on hands. The Blue Dragon ran up with a book in her arms, the skill book in question, and then paused when she looked at the warrior in damaged armor. This is the volunteer? He doesn't look like the sort. The warrior laughed. No, I am one of the team leaders, not a tank. I only came to explain the issue we had in the dungeon. The tanks are on their way. Carl, will you also be making them items if they advance their class? Hugo asked.
Carl nodded.
If they can make it to Paladin and reduce the warrior overload, I will gift one epic grade, Overlord-ranked item to them as an advancement present. Suitable to their role as tank, of course. Hugo smiled. Very generous of you. Now, we just have to hope that the plan works. Sapphire laughed. Oh, I don't think that it will be an issue. I have studied the skill that Carl has in the library archives, and I believe that he will be able to make sure that the advancement happens, even if we have to give them another extra skill. Carl's expression made Hugo laugh. The monster man surely could do it, but he was sure that Carl had just been volunteered for extra work by the knowledge-obsessed dragon. There was no way that she would let the chance to know what did work pass without fully testing it. Chapter 1147. Better Tanks. The Overlord-ranked tanks were getting used to various people running toward the Darklight Host Manor, so it was no real shock when it was their turn to be called for by the guild masters. Ah, welcome everyone. How are we going to do this? Guild Master Hugo greeted them as the tanks entered. Sapphire frowned at the number of warriors in the room. She was not writing that many books. Not happening. I am going to teach Carl a new skill, and then he will use his affinity for beast and dragonkin to transfer it to all of you, she decided. Thor laughed as he came out to watch the show, and Carl took the opportunity to tease him. Done pouting about your Tessa being gone for the wedding planning? I wasn't pouting. It's just not as fun when she's not here. Then Thor spoke out loud. I will create a consecrated area that should make the spell transfer more effective. Consecration certainly wouldn't hurt anything, Carl assumed. Sapphire gave him the Lay on Hands book, and Carl opened the cover, learning the spell, while Tion snorted in derision. Such an inferior healing spell, he complained. It's an introductory spell for warriors. Carl reminded him. That made sense to the little fox. Warriors tended to be brutish and dumb, but dangerous. Thor activated the circle of holy magic around Carl, and motioned for the nearest warrior to come forward. One at a time, and Carl will teach as many of you the skill as possible. Thor instructed. The first of the tanks stepped forward into the circle of holy light, and Carl extended his finger, while speaking in ancient Dwarven. Poke! Champion Carl offers knowledge. The warrior looked stunned as he stepped back, and another man took his spot. But it was more than just stunned, he was in the class upgrade menu, as the application of the Lay on Hands skill had immediately triggered the option to advance to Paladin, and the system had been waiting multiple ranks for him to get a skill that would unlock a class option. Unlike Carl's group, who went into the dungeon or trial the moment that they suspected that they would be able to advance, these warriors had been through the dungeon hundreds of times after they became eligible. They just didn't have the qualifications to unlock any of the other classes. Hugo realized what was going on the moment that the second man's gaze went vacant, and arranged for the others to move them to a safe sitting spot while they explored the class options. Oh, this is wonderful. So many not warriors. Sapphire sighed with a wistful expression. Hugo chuckled. Are we doing all the warriors? Because I have a few mages who wouldn't mind a chance to leave the basic class.
Karl schrugged.
It's more likely to work with the lower-level members. Most of the totems and myths should already have other skills that should have activated the option. But if there are still some stuck in base classes, I can at least try. Hugo shook his head. I meant the Overlord-ranked mages. The rest can work it out on their own. We recruited them for their skills. If that's the case, then I don't see an issue with doing some of them later, when I have an appropriate skill picked to try to trigger an advancement. Mages are a bit more tricky, as there are so many ways that they can go. But I only know a few options for warriors. Either Paladin, Crusader, Berserker, or possibly Blood Knight. But I'm not sure that the skill I have in mind will trigger that last one. Hugo looked intrigued, but not nearly as excited as Sapphire. What do you think will trigger Blood Knight? Life Steal? That might do if you have an advanced version. She suggested. I have Life Steal and Essence Transfer, which is basically an advanced Life Steal. One of the two should be able to trigger the class, I think. Karl agreed. What would you use to trigger Crusaders? Hugo asked. Holy Blast. The mage smiled. Yeah, that makes sense. If there is any spell that would create a Crusader from a warrior, that's the one. Karl motioned for more of the tanks to come forward so that they could finish their work for the evening. The success rate had been 100% so far, and that was a wonderful sign for the experiments that Sapphire was hoping to run. An hour later, they had a full team of paladins with no more standard warriors among the tanks for the Overlord-ranked teams. We're going to ask you to at least try for the totem-ranked tanks, right? Perhaps not all paladins, but there are still entry-class warriors among them.
Karl schrugged.
No harm in trying. If you want to bring them by, I can try now. Or I can get started on the gifts for our new paladins. The warriors had completely forgotten about that. The class alone was a huge gift for them, so a free bit of gear was just an extra bonus, far beyond what they would have expected. All right, bring the totems over and let's make them all not warriors. That should improve the next run's results. I don't know what we're going to do about the whole advanced dungeon situation, though. If we improve the gear for all the overlords, that will solve it easily enough, but it might be necessary to start giving out some improved skills to the damage dealers as well. If the tanks are improved and still taking too much damage for the healers to work with, it's either a gear issue or the damage dealers slacking. But a couple of long-duration damage skills, like Golems, can help make up for some of both of those issues. Sapphire nodded. All mages should be Golem mages at this point. There is no good reason for them not to be. Hugo gave her a confused look. You mean other than the fact that the local branch of the church only sells 5 Golem skill books a year? Sapphire shrugged. They're a lot of work, and we don't like doing it. Hugo chuckled. And now I have the real reason. But you have a point. Not all inscriptionists are in the church library, so someone should have managed to make a business of selling Golem skill books by now. They're just hoarding them to drive the price up. Drive the price up, you say? Karl asked. I should have kept my mouth shut. But yes, the Golem skill book goes for as much as a totem-ranked armor suit.
Karl smiled.
Well, I think that I can likely do it for a bit less than that. Guild Alliance special pricing. However, they have to bring snacks. They were getting desperately short on kitchen staff with all the new additions. Chapter 1148. Do you have golems? Karl gave Hugo a conspiratorial smirk. You do have golems, don't you? The big mage laughed. I do have the golems. I even have more golems. The greater golem spell. I believe that the mage in your overlord group has the same one with dragon hounds. Karl nodded. Indeed she does, but if there are others in your guild who are missing it, bring them here. And bring cake. I don't want to go back to the guild house to get dinner. From the kitchen, someone laughed. Relax, we are cooking. I know that it's not part of our duties here, but we enjoy cooking. One of the Dragonkin runecrafters joked. If you're short on ingredients, let me know. I've got a bunch stored that might not be in the house. A bunch of stored food was a vast understatement, given how much was growing not only in the beast space, but also in the tiny world. Not all of that was edible to most species, but enough of it was that they wouldn't have to fear going hungry. The dragonkin nodded. Miss Lotus stocked up the kitchen so that everyone could make snacks when we wanted, but her definition of snack is very broad, so there is a fully stocked pantry here. Still, Carl sent a message to Davis, requesting that he find enough kitchen staff for the Xylaz Guild house, even if they didn't actually live here full-time. There was a portal and plenty of room for worker lodging, so he could just keep them here during their shifts and let them go home on the weekend. Got it, boss. I have a stack of applications from residents of the suburbs. I can send them over right away if you need chefs. Davis replied. Just make sure that they're not too skittish. We get a lot of totem and mythic ranked visitors, and the auras can be pretty overwhelming for those at lower ranks. Working in the Alliance House would be a nightmare of powerful aura overloads for most commander and royal ranked kitchen staff from Drod. Anyone over that rarely worked in the kitchens anymore, but Carl had faith in Davis to find him someone. A couple of minutes later, the response came. They will be there in 15 minutes. They just need to pack for the week. More of the Alliance members were arriving, and the atmosphere was becoming more of a party as the others realized that the tanks were all paladins now, especially among the healers. After all, the greatest advantage of the paladins was their holy magic, which was primarily focused on defense and self-healing. Mages, if you don't have golems, please go talk to Carl. He's got the ability to give most of you the golem spell. The fee will be put on the Guild Alliance account, and the guild masters will settle the debt in the morning. Hugo announced. That was the best news that any of the mages could have gotten. Free spells were even better than free gear. Not only would they get a new ability like the most expensive of gear, but it would also be one that would endure if they wanted to change outfits. How does the ability work? The mythic mage who had gotten the idol dress asked. You don't have golems? Carl asked. She shrugged. I never got around to buying the spell. I specialize in burst damage. Carl smiled and patted her on the head, which made her give him a confused frown. Champion Carl offers knowledge skill golem. Will be transferred to the lovely idol Annabelle. The mage laughed as the skill transferred, and began to spin in a happy dance that reminded Carl a lot of a happy lotus. I get it. Monster Man is highly attuned to beast-type pets, so he can transfer skills with head pats. All you ugly guys are screwed. She laughed. The paladins just stared at her. Did she think that Carl gave them all the same treatment? No, that was clearly reserved for her. But they all followed her when she ran outside to see what she got for golems. Annabelle summoned her new golems, and then stared at them in confusion. I think they're broken.
Karl shrugged.
What were you thinking of when you summoned them? There is a theory that the first casting can be shaped by intent. But once they're set, they're set. They both stared at the pair of Mafia goons in black suits with swords in their hands and distinctly incubi horns and tails. Then Carl smirked at the mage. You were reading a romance novel before you were called over, weren't you? That's definitely the lead from a romance book. Twins, no less. He added. After another moment of shock, Annabelle swapped outfits to her new dress armor, and then went to pose with her Mafia golem guards. There is something broken in her brain. Hugo whispered. Possibly, but now she's got golems. Carl agreed. Annabelle made her golems put their blades away, but didn't dismiss them as she came back into the house. Instead, she kept them as bodyguards, flanking her like she was an actual idol. In a way, she was. All the myths were famous even here, but it was still funny when most of these people had known her for years and knew her as a combat mage. One of the totem-ranked mages came over and tilted her head for Carl to pat. You're corrupting them all. Hawk laughed. Carl transferred the golem skill again, and she raced outside to go test the spell. It was too crowded in the main room to be summoning golems, especially if you didn't know what size they would be. How about a handshake? A tall dragonkin man asked. You know, I just poked the paladins. The head pats are something like a running joke.
Carl replied.
Then he shook the mage's hand and granted the golem skill. There were many more mages who needed the skill, but the room was getting crowded already, and the party was starting to overflow the main room. They would have to find their way to Carl, but the guests were good about leaving him enough space to continue granting the golem skill, so that all the totem and overlord mages could have it for their next run. Even a little more damage would be a great help to all the groups, especially if someone got golems that could help tank. Tion. Opal, could you please set up the upstairs for me? Just arrange the chairs and such for guests. Got it. Opal is sending her illusions to do it now. Tion replied. Opal also sent a group of them to help in the kitchen and deliver the drinks and snacks. Then one of the gargoyles led a group of demons up the stairs, nudging them toward Carl. Oh, the new hires, right? It's an impromptu party, so I will let you get settled in after. Carl greeted the man in front. No worries. Davis explained the situation, and the gargoyles let us drop off our luggage on the way up. Are we doing a full dinner service? Or just appetizers and drinks? Appetizers and drinks. The guests have brought many of them already. I instructed them to bring snacks and cake. Chapter 1149. No More Warriors Initiative. The celebration for the tanks grew by the minute, until it not only filled the main and top floors of the house, but also the garden, the street outside, and many of the nearby yards. That was excellent news to Sapphire, as she had received so many more volunteers to test her class advancement theories and provide research data that could be presented to the church. The larger the sample size, the better, especially if they were at multiple ranks. It would be a lot of work to make all those skill books, and she couldn't ask for Carl to do all the skill transfers, as that would mess up the data. But she had patience. Probably more patience than the 100 warriors who were eager to become crusaders and find out what life was like as more than a basic warrior. Holy Blast really would be the best spell to try to trigger the advancement. Sensing Truth was also one of the signature skills of a crusader. But if she gave that to them instead, there was no telling if they would end up as an infiltration specialized class, or if it would advance them at all. However, giving them holy magic certainly would. Today had saved her days of work gathering a suitable group of volunteers, even if these were more powerful volunteers than they had been planning to use at the start. The party was in full swing when Carl got a message from Wendy at the Druid Guildhouse. Mr. Carl? There is a large group of strange people here to see you. They say that the governor sent them. Right, they were still waiting for the gardeners. Constantly adding more people like this was too much hassle, and Carl was glad that it was almost over. At least he had gotten the tiny world ready for their arrival, even if he was still working to optimize the fundamental rules in the space. He should be able to continue that after they were there. It was just the expansion of the space that he really needed to do in advance. Guild masters, if you will excuse me for a moment, I need to go pick up a few more workers for the guild, and then I will return once they are settled in. Carl explained. Hugo smiled and nodded. We can sort out the chaos with the overlords later. I suspect that Lady Sapphire will be willing to help us over the next few days, so that we can get better damage dealers on the main overlord rank team. Carl shook his hand and then went downstairs to use the portal instead of opening a new one to go to the guild house. What he found when he arrived was certainly not what he expected. He had been told that they were nature lovers who lived in a temple, and that they didn't get along well with the towns in their area. But he hadn't expected this. The group was a mix of beastkin, dragons, demons, and elves. But they were all wearing next to nothing, and what they did have on was basic tanned hide or rough cloth. How about we move this to a new location? It will help me explain. Carl suggested, then opened the tiny world's entrance for them. The elf in the lead bowed politely, and then led her group through. That was when Carl noticed the real oddity. There were no men. He had been convinced to take in even more random women. Was he told about this? Probably. He must have just forgotten who they were sending. All right, we might as well start the introduction here. These fields are all magical plants for the alchemists. Right now, I've been using illusionary workers to do the gardening, but that's not optimal. To my left are the swamps, also home to many magical plants, and 3 species of fish. They help balance the ecosystem, so try not to overfish them or let them overpopulate the swamp. To my right is the lake, again, more fish, and the bottom of the lake has been optimized to grow water element magical crystals. There is an empty village within the mountain range over there, and that house is a replica of the guild house that we just came from. I don't know where you prefer to stay, but there is currently nobody else in here. The alchemy rooms in the guild house get regular use, as well as the dragon perches on the mountain. There should be more than enough for everyone, no need to fight for a spot to rest. Now, ask any immediate questions you have, and I will try to answer them. All of this is free for us to wander? Like, there are no off-limits areas. The elf who was leading the group asked. Yes, it's all free for you to explore, live on, maintain. In fact, visiting most of it will be a necessary part of your employment, as we've planted magical resources everywhere. Just don't mess with things that others have left here. The training grounds can be changed for use, but don't destroy the equipment left behind. The same with rooms in the guild house. Pick any empty room. Don't mess with other people's stuff. There is an alchemy room through the library in the hidden city area. It's best not to mess with that at all. Alchemy is a precise process, and Remy will not be happy if someone ruins a potion in progress. Carl explained. So the rule is basically just be good neighbors. Are any of the others prudish? Carl shook his head. Not particularly. There are a few dragon clerics and some magical beasts. Remy, the alchemist, is a Naga queen. But none of them are particularly prudish or strict about rules. The elf looked around, her eyes glowing with some sort of spell, and then turned to her group. What do you think? Is this suitable? She asked. One by one, they nodded. This place is good. It's got plenty of farmland, everything else that we need, and he said that we can do what we want as long as we don't bother anyone or let the magical crops wither. That made some of them laugh. They were mostly nature goddess-aligned druids or witches, and more than capable of taking care of the crops and the wilderness. You have a deal, guild master. The elf agreed. Guild employees verified. Suddenly, one of the dragons transformed, revealing a shaggy green leaf-covered body. A forest dragon, Carl realized. He hadn't seen one of them in ages, but she was already gone, flying off to go splash in the lake. Thank you for your kindness, guild leader. We will assess the state of all the crops and make sure that everything is perfect. The elf explained. That seemed like a dismissal to Carl, and he turned to leave while the druids began to argue about who got to go to the best areas first, and whether they should opt for indoor rooms or set up an outdoor camp. Wait, before you leave, does it rain here? This place feels like a separate space. The elf asked. Carl nodded. I have set up day and night cycles as well as weather. It rains one day a week, but the humidity is much higher around the swamp, and the temperatures aren't the same everywhere. Chapter 1150. Gardeners acquired. Carl watched as the group compromised and set up a camp by the fields, then set up cooking utensils at the camp in the swamp that was set up for the Naga visitors, and finally arranged a campsite at the shore of the lake on the edge of the beach. They also sent someone to look in the guild house replica who gave them an approving double thumbs-up gesture, and then one that Carl guessed meant that the kitchen was stocked as the gesture looked like eating. The green dragon cleric stocked the pantry, but there should still be more space if you want to add ingredients that she didn't choose. Carl offered. The elf nodded, then began to strip down to change into an apron. Just the apron. So that's what they meant about prudes. We have great spells for creating food, and I have 1,000 years of cooking experience. If there is one thing that we don't need to fear, it is starvation. She laughed. All right, I will let everyone settle in. I come here fairly often to work on the fundamental rules in the space, as well as my own knowledge. Just let me know if you need anything. Eventually, he would tell her that aprons were usually worn over clothing. But if his guess was right, the minimal amount of clothing that they wore, like the thick green robes that the druids working in the swamp had changed into, were more like protective gear than fashion. Hawk laughed as he came out into the tiny world to fly around for a while and explore the space. Lotus is going to love these people. They're already working on growing coffee on the slopes of the mountain. Plus, half of them are naked and planning on playing in the lake all day. That sounded like peak Lotus behavior. Druids, witches, and green dragon clerics had a lot in common. But while Carl was getting the new hires settled in to maintain the plants of the tiny world, Lotus and the others were finishing their cram session for the wedding plans. They had even planned a date. 1 month later, on the day with what Matilda had determined to be the perfect moonlight for the end of the party. It would highlight their decorations just right in the areas outside the main party area, and encourage the partygoers to have more fun and drink less heavily. Nobody doubted her visions of the future. They had seen what she could do with them. The world wasn't as isolated as it seemed. It was actually connected to the immortal realm in hundreds of places. But the supreme rank dragon kept those places hidden or locked away, and had placed a spell over them to make them less detectable on the other side. There were still a few occasions where someone tried to push through, usually in an attempt to gather slaves or servants for the immortal realm. But when they did, she would foresee it and place defenses over the area. She did it reflexively after millennia of practice, but it still needed to be done if this world was going to be protected until it could support a spell that would isolate it completely. The immortal realm could just live without one of the billions of mortal worlds to lord their supremacy over. It wasn't like they were actually short on mortal realms to plunder. Every resident of the immortal realm could have 100 mortal realm planets to themselves, and they would never run out of them. The problem was that there were only so many that were even worth plundering. Nobody wanted the ones that were completely devoid of magic, the ones which had never developed a sentient species, or the ones where the sentient species on them were entirely too hostile to be tamed. The insectoid worlds under the beast and spider gods. Definitely in low demand. Not zero, there was a market for everything if you looked long enough, but far from what anyone would consider to be sought after. Once upon a time, Matilda had considered being one of those immortals who would claim an entire world for themselves to experiment upon and exploit. But when she looked into the future, it was utterly boring. With too much influence from herself, the outcomes were utterly predictable. Complete randomization led to patterns of probability, and her mind was too sharp to miss them. So, she had remained here, where she was born, and nominated herself as protector as she watched the world advance and regress, make brilliant empires and tear them down with poor decisions. Just the right amount of chaos to keep her life enjoyable. Tell me again why the wedding has to be in 1 month? Don't you usually need like half a year for everyone to plan their attendance? Get time off, travel to the location and such? Dana asked as they were packing to return to their daily lives. Because the traditional wedding ceremony involves a spell that can only be done when the celestial alignment and magical state of the planet are right, and the next one for you and Carl is more than 2 years away if we miss this one. If we wait that long, he's probably going to be a myth, and his power will be dragging him away from you. But once we do the wedding, and the soul bond is in place, that won't be a concern. Matilda explained. How a soul bond would change the difference in their power levels was something that the Chaos Dragon always managed to skim over, using "you will understand once it's in place" as an excuse. So, Dana packed the last of her belongings from the resort in the Chaos Realm where Matilda had brought them to plan, and followed everyone through the portal back to Xylaz. Lotus laughed as she stepped into the Alliance house, where Carl was meditating on a beanbag chair on the top floor. Oh, that is different. It's only been like 3 days here. Not a whole month of intensive wedding planning. This is good, I like it. Plus, the goddess says that Carl found new friends for me to hang out with. Oh, there are new staff too? Hello. Then the cleric was off to the kitchen, intent on meeting the newly arrived staff that Davis had sent over from Drod. Naksha watched the nature cleric and the demons immediately get into an argument as Lotus tried adding ingredients to whatever they were cooking, but it looked more like they were insulted than actually angry. They sent cooking-obsessed obsession demons to work the kitchen. This is bad news for Lotus. The black dragon chuckled. Yeah, they're not going to be as flexible with their recipes as Tessa is. But this place is spotless. I think that they sent a caretaker as well. We should ask Carl how many people he hired while we were away. Dana agreed. Beside her, a gargoyle made a chirping laugh, and Dana knew that it wouldn't be just a handful of party staff, cooks and cleaners for the Alliance house. It was time to go find Carl. But before she headed upstairs to see what he was doing, she checked the guild roster. That would tell her much more easily if there were new people. New guild members 24. New guild employees 86. Now, she definitely had some questions about what he had been doing while they were gone.